Betrayal doesn't always roar. Sometimes it slips in quietly, dressed as celebration, and sometimes the silence that follows is louder than any storm. I should have spoken that day, but I didn't. My name is Harold Whitman. 72 years behind me, most of them steady and honorable. I was a history teacher, retired now, with a modest pension and a house full of memories. I buried my wife, Eleanor, a week before the story I'm about to tell truly began. We'd been married nearly 50 years. She was the calm to my storm, the patient voice beside my stubborn one. Losing her wasn't just losing a partner, it was losing the compass that kept me steady. Her funeral was small but dignified, exactly as she wanted. The church smelled faintly of lilies, though I could barely tell one flower from another anymore. My hands trembled as I greeted neighbors, colleagues, cousins I hadn't seen in years. All the while one thought gnawed at me. My daughter wasn't there. Lisa, my only child. She was born when Eleanor and I were already in our 30s, a surprise in every way. A headstrong girl, stubborn like her father, spoiled like her mother allowed, but bright, always bright. Eleanor believed in soft hands and open doors. I believed in discipline and consequence. Between us, we tried to give Lisa balance. And yet, on the day we laid Eleanor to rest, Lisa was absent. Not for reasons of illness, not for reasons of travel or accident. Number. She was hosting her 40th birthday party, balloons strung across a rented hall, cameras flashing as she sliced a 3-tiered cake with a silver knife. People posted photographs online. I saw them the very night I returned from the burial, my suit still smelling faintly of earth. I stared at those pictures for a long time. Lisa in her red dress, grinning wide, champagne in hand. The caption read, "A Queen at 40. Cheers to the next chapter." The contrast hit me harder than the shovelful of dirt I'd dropped on Eleanor's coffin. While I stood among shadows and hymns, my daughter raised a glass to herself. I said nothing, not to her, not to anyone. The family whispered, though. A cousin leaned close at the wake and murmured, "Couldn't believe Lisa didn't come." Another shook his head, muttering, "Shameful." I let their words wash past me. My silence, I thought, was the last kindness I could give. The week that followed was heavy, each day slower than the last. I moved through the house like a ghost, Eleanor's sweater still draped over the chair in the den, her glasses folded neatly by the window. Grief is not tidy. It comes in waves, sometimes gentle, sometimes enough to drown you. But beneath the grief, another feeling grew. Quiet, simmering, dangerous. Betrayal. I had never asked much of Lisa. I gave her an education, a stable home, every chance I could afford. Eleanor shielded her from consequences I would have enforced. And now, at the one moment when her presence mattered most, Lisa chose balloons and cake over respect for her mother. On the 7th day, when the lawyer called to arrange the reading of Eleanor's will, I felt something stir, a sense that unfinished business was waiting for us all. Eleanor had been meticulous, always careful with her words, always one step ahead. If she had left instructions, there was more to this story than Lisa realized. I said nothing still, holding my cards close. But as I folded my suit for the meeting, I thought of those photographs again, the candles glowing on Lisa's cake, the smile on her lips. And I knew, deep down, that consequences were coming. I often tell myself that people don't change, not really. They reveal themselves in small, quiet ways long before the grand gestures arrive. Looking back, Lisa's absence at her mother's funeral was not the first time she'd chosen herself over family. It was merely the loudest. Lisa had grown up in a home filled with books, music, and long evenings at the table. Eleanor and I believed in conversation, in listening. But from the time she could talk, Lisa seemed convinced that the world was a stage, and she was meant to stand in its brightest light. She craved attention, adored applause. At school plays, she wasn't content unless the loudest cheers were for her. At birthdays, she tore open gifts, not with gratitude, but with expectation. I worried, often. I wanted discipline, boundaries, some reminder that love was not the same as indulgence. Eleanor, ever the soft heart, would smile and say, "She'll grow out of it, Harold. Let her shine a little. The world will dim her soon enough." But the world didn't dim Lisa. It only fed her hunger. By the time she was a teenager, the pattern had set. If there was work to do, Lisa found a reason to be elsewhere. If there was recognition to earn, she was at the front of the line. Eleanor covered for her, smoothing excuses with the practiced grace of a mother unwilling to see flaws too clearly. I allowed it more often than I should have. That is the burden of fatherhood. We want to believe our children are better than they show themselves to be. Still, I loved her fiercely. Even now, after all that has passed, I cannot pretend otherwise. Love doesn't vanish when respect does. It just changes shape, hardens around the cracks like cement poured into broken stone. A few days after the funeral, I finally called her. The silence between us had stretched too long, and though I felt no appetite for confrontation, I needed to hear her voice. She answered on the third ring, cheerful, breathless, as though she had just come in from another gathering. "Dad, you called," she said. Her tone scraped at me. No trace of mourning, no heaviness, just the chirp of a woman still basking in her own glow. "I called," I replied slowly, "because I wondered if you wanted to talk about last week." A pause, the faint rustle of movement on her end. "Last week? Your mother's funeral," I said flatly. Another pause, longer this time. Then a sigh, practiced, weary. "Dad, I told you, I had my party. It was booked months ago, deposits paid, people flying in. What was I supposed to do, cancel everything?" Her words landed like stones. I gripped the receiver tighter. "Your mother was buried, Lisa. Deposits can be lost, tickets can be wasted, but you only get one chance to say goodbye." Silence stretched. I could almost see her rolling her eyes, the way she used to as a teenager when I lectured her about curfews or schoolwork. "You're being dramatic," she said finally. "Mom would have understood. She always supported me, no matter what. She wouldn't want me miserable on my birthday. That was the first knife. To use Eleanor's kindness as a shield for her selfishness, it cut deep. But I held my tongue. I had learned long ago that shouting at Lisa only drove her deeper into defiance. "I see," I said simply. "Well, that's all I wanted to hear." "Don't be mad, Dad," she added quickly, her tone softening. "We'll do something together soon. Just us." To honor her, I wanted to believe her, but the words felt hollow. I knew then that Eleanor had seen something I hadn't. Her last months, she had spoken of legacy often, of wanting things in order. I assumed it was the illness speaking, the quiet urgency of time running short. But perhaps she had known Lisa better than I ever admitted to myself. That night I sat in Eleanor's old chair, the house quiet around me. I thought of the little girl Lisa once was, the one who clutched Eleanor's hand on her first day of school, the one who fell asleep on my shoulder during thunderstorms. I asked myself where that girl had gone, and whether she'd ever truly been there at all. When the lawyer's letter arrived the next morning, calling us all to his office for the reading of the will, I felt a strange calm. Something in me understood. Eleanor had left more than memories behind. She had left a message, and soon enough, Lisa would hear it. The lawyer's office was a narrow building downtown, the kind that smelled faintly of paper and polished wood. I'd been there with Eleanor once, years back, when she insisted on drawing up her will with precision. She was always deliberate like that, preparing for storms before the clouds even formed. I remember joking then, "We've got time yet." She only smiled in that quiet way of hers, the kind that suggested she knew something I didn't. Now the time had arrived. The waiting room was already filled when I arrived. My brother sat stiffly in a chair by the wall, his hands folded like he was back in church. Two of Eleanor's cousins whispered together, their voices dropping when I entered. And then Lisa. She swept in 10 minutes late, heels clicking against the floor, sunglasses still perched on her head, though the sky outside was gray. She carried herself like a performer taking the stage, eyes scanning for her audience. "Dad," she said, leaning down to kiss my cheek. Her perfume was strong, cloying. "You look tired. Have you been eating?" I didn't answer. She didn't wait for one. When the lawyer called us in, the room grew silent. He was a thin man with a voice that carried, precise and steady. Papers spread across his desk like lines of script, each one marked with Eleanor's care. "Eleanor Whitman," he began, "was deliberate in her wishes. She left nothing to chance. Today I will read her words exactly as she wrote them." He started with the ordinary, small bequests to friends, keepsakes to cousins, donations to the church and library. Each line was like hearing her voice again, thoughtful and fair. I sat quietly, hands folded, letting the sound of her name wash over me. And then he reached the section on family inheritance. "To my daughter, Lisa Whitman," he read, "I leave a token portion of my estate, sufficient for comfort, but not abundance. This is not given in anger, but in truth. Lisa, I have loved you every day of your life, but love is not the same as trust, and trust must be earned. I have seen how often you chose yourself over others, how often appearances meant more than presence. I hope, with what I leave you, you will reflect and grow." The air thickened. Lisa's head snapped up, her jaw tightening. The lawyer continued before she could interrupt. "The majority of my estate, including the family home and its holdings, I leave to my husband Harold with full discretion to manage as he sees fit. This is not favoritism, but protection, for him and for the values we built together. Should Lisa prove in time that she understands the meaning of loyalty and sacrifice, Harold may choose to share more. But that choice rests solely in his hands." The silence that followed was heavy, like the pause between thunder and lightning. Lisa's face drained of color. Her lips parted, but no words came at first. Then a sharp laugh, brittle and hollow. This is a joke, right? She wouldn't write that." The lawyer slid a page across the desk, Eleanor's signature at the bottom in neat script. "Mrs. Whitman wrote it herself." "It is witnessed and notarized." Lisa's eyes flicked to me, burning with accusation. "You put her up to this, didn't you? You poisoned her against me." Her voice cracked at the edges, but the anger in it was real. Family members shifted uncomfortably. My brother cleared his throat as though to intervene, but I raised a hand. "No, Lisa," I said quietly. "Your mother saw you. She always did. She made her choice." That was the first twist. For once Eleanor had spoken without softening the edges, without cushioning Lisa from consequence. She had left a verdict written in ink, a truth no amount of denial could erase. Lisa sat back in her chair, crossing her arms tightly, eyes glistening though no tears fell. I saw, in that moment, the child, beneath the woman, the girl who had always been protected from the weight of her actions. And now, with her mother gone, the shield was gone too. The lawyer shuffled his papers, oblivious to the storm brewing between us. "That concludes the reading," he said, though his words barely registered. Because in that silence, as Lisa glared at me across the polished desk, I knew the battle had only just begun. Lisa left the lawyer's office like a storm breaking glass. She didn't look back at me, didn't wait for anyone. Her heels struck the floor so hard I thought they might crack the tiles. The others whispered in her wake, but no one followed. I stayed seated, letting the room empty until the quiet returned. The lawyer, gathering his papers, gave me a long look. "She'll fight this," he said simply. "I know," I replied. My voice sounded older than I felt, worn at the edges. The truth was, I'd seen the fire in Lisa's eyes. Shock would curdle into rage, and rage into action. She was not the type to lick her wounds in private. She would strike, and she did. That very evening, I heard her car pull into my driveway. She didn't knock, just burst through the door like she still lived there. Eleanor's sweater was still draped over the chair in the den, and for one absurd moment I thought of how Eleanor would have frowned at Lisa barging in. "Dad," she snapped, her voice sharp as glass, "we need to talk." I folded the newspaper in my lap, setting it aside with deliberate calm. "Then talk." She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, her chin lifted like she was addressing a courtroom. "That will—" "It isn't fair." "It isn't," Mom's voice. "She wouldn't cut me out like that. You manipulated her." Her words stung, though I expected them. "Your mother was stronger than you give her credit for," I said evenly. "She knew her mind until the end." Lisa scoffed. "Please." She was sick. "You were whispering in her ear, convincing her I'm some selfish monster." I looked at her, really looked. The woman before me was polished, successful by appearance, but beneath it I saw the frightened child who had always assumed she was the center of gravity. I felt pity, but I did not let it soften me. "Lisa," I said quietly, "your mother saw you clearly. She hoped her words would reach you. That's all there is." Her eyes glistened, though anger masked it quickly. "No, that's not all there is. I'm going to contest this. I'll hire lawyers. You won't get away with it." That was her first true threat, and I heard in it the echo of battles to come. But instead of meeting her fury with my own, I let silence linger. I had learned, after decades of teaching, that silence can unnerve more than shouting ever could. Finally, I stood. My knees ached, but I straightened tall. "Do what you feel you must. But remember, this isn't my will you're fighting. It's your mother's." Her jaw tightened. For a moment, I thought she might strike me with words too cruel to take back. Instead, she turned, storming out as abruptly as she had entered. The slam of the door shook the house. When the echoes faded, I sat back down. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of what was coming. I knew Lisa. She would not let this lie. And so, quietly, I began my countermove. That night I opened the cedar chest Eleanor had left in the attic. Inside were letters, neat stacks bound with ribbon, her handwriting careful as always. Some were to me, some to Lisa, some to whoever might need to understand. Eleanor had prepared more than a will. She had prepared her truth, in ink and in memory. I spent hours reading, my eyes burning with fatigue and grief. In her words, Eleanor laid bare what she had seen in Lisa, brilliance mixed with selfishness, charm tangled with vanity. She spoke of love, yes, but also of disappointment, and above all she spoke of legacy, of protecting what she and I had built together. By dawn, I knew what had to be done. If Lisa tried to twist Eleanor's intentions in court, I would have her words, her letters, her voice from beyond the grave. I wasn't planning to fight Lisa. I was planning to defend Eleanor, and that gave me strength I didn't know I still had. Word travels fast in families, especially when money is involved. Within days of the will reading, the whispers had turned into open talk. Cousins who hadn't spoken to me in months suddenly called, curious about what really happened. Old friends of Eleanor's sent polite but probing letters, and through it all, Lisa worked the shadows like a campaigner, painting herself as the wronged daughter and me as the manipulative widower. "She's telling people you brainwashed Eleanor," my brother said one evening, his voice tight with disapproval. "That you convinced her to cut Lisa out." I nodded. I expected as much. "But you can't just sit there and let her tarnish you." I smiled faintly. "Sitting still isn't the same as doing nothing." In truth, I was watching, waiting. Eleanor used to say that patience was my sharpest weapon. "You let people show themselves," she'd tell me, "and when they do, the truth comes clearer than if you shouted it." Lisa showed herself quickly. She called, demanded meetings, left messages laced with both anger and pleading. "Dad, this isn't fair." "You're isolating me. Mom wouldn't want this family torn apart other times. You'll regret letting lawyers eat up what should be mine. Why give it to strangers instead of blood?" Each word pressed harder, but I didn't bend. I'd learned, in the classroom and in life, that giving in to tantrums only teaches them to return louder. The second confrontation came one Sunday afternoon. I was in the garden, trimming the roses Eleanor had loved, when Lisa appeared at the gate. She didn't call ahead. She rarely did. "Dad, we need to talk," she said, voice brittle. I wiped my hands on my trousers, studied her face. She looked tired, shadows under her eyes, her expression tight. But her tone held no humility, only urgency. "You've been talking plenty," I said. "Half the family seems to know your side already." Her cheeks flushed. "I wouldn't have to if you'd just admit what you did. Mom never would have written that without your influence." I shook my head. "Your mother wasn't a puppet, Lisa. She made her own choices. You just don't like them." She stepped closer, lowering her voice as though the roses might overhear. "You're making me the villain. I'm your daughter. Doesn't that mean anything?" Her words cut, because of course it meant something. Blood always means something. But blood without respect is just biology. "It means I'll always love you," I said evenly. "But it doesn't mean I'll excuse you." Her mouth tightened, lips pressed so thin they nearly disappeared. "If you won't bend, I'll break this another way. Don't think you can just sit on Mom's money and house like a king. I'll take it back. All of it." The words hung between us, sharp as a blade. Then she turned, heels crunching on the gravel, and was gone. That night, I sat in Eleanor's chair, staring at the letters she'd left me. Her handwriting felt like a voice across time, steadying me when doubt crept in. "Hold the line, Harold," she seemed to say. "The truth will defend itself if you give it room." Still, doubt gnawed at me. I was 72. My health wasn't what it once was. Court battles were long and draining. Lisa was in her prime, sharp, ruthless, and unafraid to wound. Could I withstand what was coming? The next morning a letter arrived from Lisa's attorney, formally contesting the will. My hands shook as I unfolded it. The words were cold, legal, designed to strip sentiment from what was, at its core, a family's fracture. So it was war now. A war not of swords, but of signatures, not of armies, but of arguments. I closed the letter, placed it atop Eleanor's stack of writings, and whispered aloud, "We're in it together, my love. One more battle." The roses outside bent in the wind, their petals trembling but unbroken, and I thought, so am I. The courthouse was colder than I expected, though perhaps that was just my own nerves. I had dressed carefully that morning, the same navy suit I'd worn at Eleanor's funeral, polished shoes, tie knotted tight. Dignity was my armor now. Lisa sat across the aisle, flanked by her attorneys. She looked immaculate, as always, hair swept back, lips painted, her expression carefully rehearsed. But I noticed the small things, The tremor in her hand as she shuffled her papers, the way her jaw clenched whenever our eyes met. The judge called us to order. The proceedings began. Lisa's lawyer was slick, all confidence and polished phrases. He painted me as manipulative, a widower who had influenced his ailing wife to tilt the will in his favor. He spoke of unnatural decisions and a daughter unfairly diminished. His words had weight, and I saw the murmurs ripple through the benches where cousins and neighbors sat as witnesses. Then it was our turn. My lawyer, a steady man named Hughes, rose and addressed the court. "Your Honor, we have evidence Mrs. Whitman acted of her own clear will and intention. She left not only her written words, but additional material that speaks directly to her state of mind." Lisa's lawyer scoffed. "Additional material? Convenient." But Hughes only nodded to the clerk, who wheeled in a small television and a stack of labeled envelopes. My heart stuttered when I saw them. I hadn't known Hughes had gone this far. Then again, perhaps Eleanor had arranged it herself. "Your Honor," Hughes continued, "Mrs. Whitman recorded a message to accompany her will. We submit it now." The judge nodded. The clerk pressed play. The screen flickered, grainy at first, then cleared. And there she was, Eleanor. My Eleanor, sitting in her favorite chair, the one by the window where the light always fell soft in the afternoons. She wore the blue cardigan I'd bought her on our 40th anniversary. Her hair was thinner than I remembered, her face pale with illness, but her eyes burned with clarity. "If you're seeing this," she began, her voice steady, "then I am gone." The courtroom fell silent. Even the shuffle of papers stilled. "I want it known," she continued, "that the choices I made in my will were mine alone. No one pressured me. Harold did not manipulate me. In fact, he urged me to be gentle, but I could not. Not this time. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. "Lisa," Eleanor said, looking straight into the camera, as if straight into her daughter's soul, "I love you. That will never change. But love without responsibility is not enough. Too many times you chose your own comfort over family, your own image over presence. Even at the end, I feared you might not come when I needed you most. And so I wrote my will not to punish you, but to protect what matters." Lisa's face across the aisle drained of color. She shifted, blinking rapidly, her lips parting as though to object, but no sound came. Eleanor's voice carried on, calm and deliberate. "Harold has my trust. He has always had it. I leave him discretion because he understands sacrifice, because he will use what we built together with care. Lisa, if you wish to earn more, you must show through actions, not words, that you are worthy of it. This is my wish, my final word." The video ended. The screen went black. For a long moment, no one breathed. The judge cleared his throat softly. "Well," he said, his voice more subdued now, "that is as clear as it gets." Lisa's lawyer muttered something about emotional manipulation, but his tone had lost its conviction. The family in the gallery shifted again. Only this time the murmurs carried sympathy for me, not suspicion. I sat still, my hands folded, though inside me a storm had broken loose. To hear her voice again, it was like Eleanor had stepped into the room, placed her hand on mine, and said, "Hold steady, Harold. The truth is ours." Lisa finally spoke, her voice trembling. That can't count. It isn't fair. She was sick." The judge shook his head. "She was lucid. The recording is dated, signed, and notarized. It will be entered into the record." And just like that, the tide turned. Lisa lowered her gaze, shoulders hunched, her defiance crumbling under the weight of her mother's words. For the first time in years, I saw her not as the untouchable woman she pretended to be, but as a daughter unmasked, lost exposed and small. The second twist had struck, and this time there was no stage for her to perform on, no applause to shield her, only silence. The trial ended faster than I expected. With Eleanor's recording entered into evidence, the judge dismissed Lisa's challenge within the week. There was no room left for doubt. The will stood, her words carved into law as firmly as they had been etched into my memory. But victory doesn't always feel like triumph. Sometimes it feels like silence settling after a storm, leaving wreckage scattered on the shore. Lisa didn't come to see me immediately. She vanished for several days, no calls, no messages. I thought perhaps she'd accepted the outcome, gone back to her own world of parties and friends who told her only what she wanted to hear. I was wrong. She came one evening, unannounced as always, but this time she didn't storm through the door. She stood on the porch, shoulders slumped, makeup smudged. For the first time in years, she looked less like the polished woman she tried to be, and more like the frightened girl who once clung to Eleanor's skirt when thunderstorms rattled the windows. "Dad," she said softly, "please." I let her in. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where we'd eaten countless meals as a family. Eleanor's chair stood empty between us, a silent witness. Lisa's eyes brimmed with unshed tears. "I'm sorry," she whispered, though her tone carried more desperation than repentance. "I didn't think Mom would. I didn't think she'd say all that." "You didn't think she saw you?" I corrected gently. Her lips trembled. I just thought it was my birthday, Dad. I didn't know it would matter so much." The words were small, too small for the wound she'd inflicted. But I listened. I owed her that much. "You missed her funeral," I said quietly. "You missed your chance to stand for her when it mattered. You can't undo that, Lisa. And you can't undo the choices she made because of it." She leaned forward, reaching for my hand. But I didn't move to meet hers. "Dad, I don't want to lose everything. You can change this. You can give me more. Please. I'm your daughter." There it was, the final card she always played. Blood as leverage, family as currency. Once, it might have worked. But now, Eleanor's voice still rang in my ears, steady and unyielding. "You're my daughter," I said. "That's why I'll always love you. But loving you doesn't mean indulging you. Your mother left me with a duty, and I won't betray it. Not for you, not for anyone." Her eyes hardened, tears vanishing as quickly as they'd come. She drew her hand back, her jaw tightening. "So that's it, then. You've chosen her over me?" I felt the words strike deep, but I didn't flinch. "I didn't choose, Lisa." "You did. When you walked away from your mother's grave, you chose. And when she wrote her will, she chose too. I'm just carrying it forward." The silence that followed was heavy, final. She stood slowly, her chair scraping against the floor. Without another word, she left the house. I watched her walk down the path, her figure framed by the twilight. For the first time, I didn't wonder if she'd come back. I knew she might. People like Lisa rarely sever ties completely. But if she did, it would have to be on new terms, ones forged not in entitlement, but in humility. When the door closed, I sat at the table a long time, Eleanor's absence pressing against me like a second skin. I whispered aloud, as though she were still there. "We did it, my love. We held the line." And for the first time since she'd gone, I felt not just grief, but peace. The weeks that followed felt quieter than I'd imagined. No more court dates, no more lawyers' letters sliding under my door. Lisa disappeared from the neighborhood gossip, her voice absent from the phone that once rang daily with demands. For the first time in a long while, the house was still. Grief, of course, lingered. It always does. I still reached for Eleanor's side of the bed some mornings, forgetting she wasn't there. I still caught myself saving up small stories to tell her, as if she were only a call away. But the ache had dulled into something bearable, a steady throb instead of a piercing wound. The family, too, seemed to shift. Cousins who had once whispered doubt began visiting again, bringing casseroles, sitting with me in the garden. My brother stopped by on Sundays, helping me trim the roses Eleanor had loved. Slowly, I felt the threads of connection stitching themselves back together, looser, perhaps, but intact. And Lisa? She remained distant. I saw her name now and then, tagged in photographs online, smiling at parties, her arm draped around friends who didn't know or didn't care about the storm she had just walked through. She didn't call, not even on my birthday. But that was her choice. Choices always bear their weight. One evening I went through the cedar chest again, rereading Eleanor's letters. In one, written not long before, she died. She had left me a single line that struck harder than all the rest. "Do not let love blind you to truth, Harold. Protect what matters, even from those you love most." I folded that letter carefully, placed it back in the chest, and closed the lid. It wasn't anger that filled me then. It was acceptance. I had done what she asked. I had held the line, not with fury, but with steadiness. That was the victory, quiet but decisive. Life doesn't hand out neat endings. I know Lisa may never change, she may never forgive, never understand. And yet, in some corner of my heart, I still hope. Hope that one day she'll remember not the inheritance she lost, but the love that was always offered, waiting to be claimed. Until then, I carry both grief and peace, side by side. I walk past the churchyard where Eleanor rests, whisper a few words to her stone, and keep going. The world is smaller now, but it is still mine. Betrayal doesn't always roar. Sometimes it comes dressed as celebration. And when the silence falls after, you learn that silence can be its own kind of justice.